Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast In Shape to Grow, the podcast that wants to inspire entrepreneurs, freelancers, coaches to care about their own health. In today's episode, I'm very happy to introduce you to the work and the life of Michael Rosolheim. Michael is the creator of many programs, many summits. He is the creator of the Rebel Health Tribe and also a new platform about mental health. You will discover that Michael went through his own journey for holistic health, global health, from physical to mental health, and from this experience created an amazing platform of educations to make sure that everyone could apply knowledge for their own health. So I hope that once again this podcast will inspire you. Let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, you can put them in the commentary sections or directly contact Michael. So till next time, take care. Hello, Michael. How are you today from Italy?
I'm good. Thank you, David, for having me here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I remember the first time I sent you an email. It was just before or when you were launching Primal 90. And I was so excited about this program that I sent you an email and said, oh, that's amazing. And I want to translate it in French. And you said, well, there's 30 videos, 22 guides, and 30 other stuff. So it took me a year for it. So you may not be able to translate everything in French and say, oh yeah, that's a big work. So before diving into your work and your mission today, Michael, do you allow me to come back on a few moments of your career?
Sure.
So you started.
That was a long, hold on, I'm fixing my light. That was a long time ago, that email. So
yeah,
I'm surprised you remember.
Yeah,
it was about 8 years ago.
Yeah, I remember. I thought I would be able to find the email I have sent you because I have some like archive sometimes, but I haven't. But I found the first email I received from you, and I forwarded to my wife, and I said, "Look, this amazing program. It's even more. It's even better than a class because you have so many people talking about one topic." And it was the beginning of the health summit. So I really remember, and I will have another things to remind you. But anyways, so you started in Western Illinois University as to study teaching, and then you started teaching for 2 years, but didn't really like it. So you switched to the service industry for 8 years, and I saw one of your interviews saying that you had a nice experience tasting and drinking a lot of beautiful things, but for your health, it wasn't the best option. And by 2009, you decided to start a master in exercise physiology to become a personal trainer. And really quickly, and I remember one of my latest interview from Sean Crushton a few weeks ago, he said the same thing. Kicking ass and starving people didn't seem to work very well. So you start to look around and see other solutions. And you found this article from Paul Chek. As a Czech practitioner, I can really relate to your discovery at that time about an article telling the 50 ingredients of a smoothie. And yesterday, or the day before, I sent an article to my wife about M&Ms. And about what's inside, and she started to say, no, that's never again, because we don't have this kind of stuff in general at home, but sometimes you have some cravings, and you go for one thing that it reminds me your childhood or something. And when I saw it in the kitchen, I said, let me show you a little article, and sometimes one article can change your life. So that's what you did. You started to study with Paul Chek, the Holistic and Lifestyle Coaching certification. And the next year with Reed Davis about functional nutrition diagnosis. And you mentioned, and it's very important, I think, for the people listening to us, you mentioned that your healing process, your health process was slow, and you started to lose a little bit of weight. You started to cope with your sleep issues, with your skin issues. And after some times, you decided to create this program because you were feeling like repeating the same thing over and over. So my first question for you, Michael, is you started as a teacher, and at that time, it took a year to create this program, 12 modules and 15 hours of educations. Why is education so important for you? Where is it from?
I don't know. First off, you did a lot of homework, man. So kudos for that. That's definitely the most that anybody I've ever interviewed with has known about my background. So I don't know. I had a couple good teachers in high school that I really liked, and I always I didn't feel like I fit into the model of like I don't know, doing financial things or going to the corporate world or working in, I don't know. I never felt like I fit in any of these like career tracks. I could never see myself like going on a 9 to 5 to an office and doing that kind of thing, even when I was young, when I was a kid. And I was interested in history and sociology and like studying both the history and like cultures and how people behave and act. Like I was always interested in that. And that's what I chose to study in college. And with a history degree, there's not a lot to do. Like you can either become a professor and teach at the university level if you go all the way to getting like a PhD or something, or you can write books, which I didn't want to write books. And so teaching was kind of the thing that I could do with the interests that I had. And then I enjoyed the act of teaching. I didn't enjoy working in the school system. So I only did that for about 1.5 years. And it was really tough to walk away from something that I had just studied and like got my college degree in and started this career. And then I just quit because I couldn't see myself doing it long term. And there were enough teachers at the schools that weren't passionate about what they were doing and didn't like it, and they didn't need another one. But I did enjoy teaching. Like I think what it is that I enjoy seeing other people like light up when they learn something new, like I do when I learn something new. Like I enjoy being able to put something in front of somebody in a way that where I know that they get it, like they understand it, or communicating in a way that makes things clear to people that I feel are important for them to know or understand. And so that's something I found that I'm pretty good at, is taking complex stuff and turning it into something that's easy for people to follow, which is then how that program got started. Was I was studying all this really complex stuff in the master's program at FDN, at the Czech Institute, like all this like physiology and nutrition and exercise science and functional medicine things and lab tests and whatever. But the average person that just doesn't want to feel crappy anymore, like they don't need to know the biochemical reactions that are happening in this. And so it was like, how do I take all this really cool information and turn it into something that the average person would understand and that it would actually have an impact for them? Because like spouting tons of information doesn't matter unless somebody actually cares and they understand it, and then you give them something they can do.
Yes.
Like scaring the hell out of everybody doesn't do anything. Like, all right, great, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? That's usually the first question. So I enjoy teaching.
Yeah, because I guess in your process, it's giving information that someone can apply and feel something different. Because I really believe that when people understand why they're doing it and they can relate to some symptoms going forward? Because you mentioned in some interview that your own recovery healing was slow. You didn't have your perfect health in 30 days or overnight, like sometimes we can see on Instagram or influencing communications. But yes, so giving the information enough to motivate your clients. So at that time, you were not an entrepreneur yet, because you had 7 sales, and if I remember, it's about 6 cents an hour based on what you did as trainers. So you met Joe Rignola. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
That was kind of a French or Italian pronunciation, but yeah. In English they say Rignola, but in Italy, where his family is from, it would be Rignola.
Rignola, yeah. So yeah, with his help, you started to strategize, rebrand, and in January 2015, Primal 90 was born, and you started with 30 interviews, 22 educational videos, and 30 tools, and 9 menus to offer to a new community that's growing and growing, because today you are in Italy, but you are an entrepreneur with an online business, and then you have this lifestyle that can help you can give you the opportunity to work everywhere from everywhere in the world. After the Primal 90, you started to do some monthly interview, and one interview with Kiran Krishiman was viral. So you started to do masterclass on the microbiome first. It's also a topic very important and very complex too. So you did the same thing that for the first time you tried to give enough education for people to apply it. From this masterclass, you went to autoimmune masterclass. I think, I'm not sure, I have a few of your masterclass, but I'm not sure I have all of them. But it's always very intense and on a way, even as a professional, I can have all these informations to apply with my clients and understand with different point of view. And you started the longevity project in April 2018. And this is the second anecdote, because preparing this interview, I sent an email in 2018 saying, well, if you want a French traduction, I will be happy to do it. But again, it's an amazing work behind this project. And my second question for you, Michael, will be, after this year of producing this longevity project, where you were interviewing people all over the world, having a amazing longevity and health and vitality and wisdom, can you today say that you had before the longevity Michael and the after longevity project?
Maybe, but not in the ways that you might think. So what we learned from the people wasn't, to me, very surprising. I think it was to some people, because everybody wanted to know, what do they eat? What exercise do they do? What, what supplements do they take, or like something. And the only reoccurring thing that we found at every place, because their diets were all different. I mean, these people were in Japan or in Costa Rica or in Italy or Greece or whatever. So the diets were all different. A lot of their diets included a lot of things that in the functional medicine, natural health world in North America are considered unhealthy. Some of these populations stayed up late at night. Some of them, none of them had structured exercise. So none of them went to the gym or did like exercise programs. They didn't take supplements. So for the Western type of approach or mindset, where it's like, what do I eat? What exercises do I do? What supplements do I take? What's the protocol? it was very difficult to create something like that from what we gathered, because it was so different everywhere. But the reoccurring theme that they would say when we would talk to them were, don't worry about things that don't matter. Don't hold grudges, and don't be angry with people. Don't and then spend time doing things you enjoy doing with people that you care about. All of them had a really strong sense of community. All of them had a lot of connection and a lot of daily connection with other people, whether it was in the town or with their family. But most of it was that they didn't have a lot of stress. And doing that project was extremely stressful from the work side of things. And it was probably the worst work-life balance that I've ever had, where I was working probably 14 to 16 hours a day for months at a time. And it was not good for my health. It was not good for my wife's health. She actually went into a pretty nasty autoimmune flare right after the movie launched that was really severe and kind of changed our life. And so the before after was my wife having an autoimmune condition, our life kind of falling apart in certain ways, and me almost working myself to death on a project, and learning that for me now, there's nothing work or career wise that's worth that.
Yeah.
So now, ever since that project, I have incorporated much stronger work-life boundaries, work-life balance, whatever term people want to use. I make sure that I'm not doing that anymore. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think they find themselves in that cycle of like working from when you wake up till you go to sleep, and you're always working and you're always doing, because you feel like you have to. And I quit doing that after that, because it almost like it was devastating. Like I felt terrible. I was, but towards the launch, I was sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a night, and it was just really stressful. So my before and after was the lessons I learned behind the scenes, not what I learned from the film, which was ironic, because in the film they're talking about like not working too much and not having too much stress and not worrying and not all these things. And so
so you were living the two extreme. You were seeing the solution, and you were living the complete opposite.
The opposite. Pretty much.
So do you think it helps you to understand it, or do you think you could understand it on a softer way? It's always tricky because we would like to be able to learn life lesson on the soft way, but
some people can, and good for them. Like some people can hear my story and then find, oh, you know what, I am, working too hard, or I am too stressed out, or whatever. For me, I can learn lessons that way now. Like I can read something or listen to somebody and like be like, okay, and then see that in my life and kind of shift things before they become really bad. But before, like then, no, I needed, like, for me to change something, I had to be forced.
Yes.
Like it had to force it. Like it had to get so bad. Like a lot of people with health issues, when they start seeking out alternative ways to heal, or outside of the conventional medicine system, it's because they've hit a point, and same thing with addiction or other types of things, or chronic pain. I've hit a point where my suffering is so bad that I'm willing to do anything to get out of it. That was kind of how I had to learn lessons for a while. And now I don't let things get to that point, and I'm much more observant, and I'm much more like present, and I'm much more aware of everything. I guess that was all just kind of like an unconscious train going forward, and I didn't consider the idea that there was ever any different ways to be.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I learned, listened to one of your interview last year. You were talking about a very hard time after this period, and with even suicidal thought, going to some deep questioning. And I know that now you're learning all the trauma effect of or the effect of the trauma on your biology and your behavior and your unconscious behavior, like you mentioned now, going to the extreme to find a way out. Do you have a moment that you could remember that you switch, or was it like your health in general? It's slowly that you found out a way and work on your trauma, or was it like a very specific point or moment?
Well, I didn't ask you beforehand if it's okay to talk about this, so we'll see. But
Sorry.
for me, it was no, I didn't ask you because what I'm going to share is some people aren't very comfortable with. So for me, I got very, very depressed. I had a huge burnout after that project, and then my wife got really sick, and that was very scary. And her autoimmune diseases are really scary when she's in a flare. It's severe pain. It disables her. I freak out. Like I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to change it. We're working with all these doctors. We were flying her around the country. Like it was very, very scary. And I had just come out of this extremely high stress work project where my nervous system was just fried. And then that happened. And yeah, I was really, and I've had various levels of depression and anxiety my whole life. I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't realize it. Like,
I
I
can
think
relate. When I hear your interview from last year, talking about this specific moment, I could relate. And you mentioned Gabor Mate that I'm studying for a few months now, and I can find out a few bit of informations.
yeah, he's great. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that they have depression or anxiety because we learn all of these behaviors or things we can do or things we can eat or things we can drink or smoke or whatever, like things we can do to not feel the discomfort of the anxiety. Like people with social anxiety, for example, if they have to go into a social situation, they may drink 2 drinks of alcohol before they go, and then they feel okay, and then they can talk, but they don't realize that they do that because being around other people makes them anxious and that they have a high level of anxiety, and then that turns into drinking more. Or people are depressed, so they eat a bunch of food that makes them feel good, and then they get overweight, and then they're more depressed because they're more overweight, and then they get less active, which makes you more depressed. And then it's these cycles. Or people, buy shoes, or they binge watch Netflix, or they, whatever it is. It can get from very extreme to things that we don't even realize are coping mechanisms. And I was very good at it my whole life. Like I had a whole bunch of them. And so I never realized I had any issues with anxiety or depression or anything until all my things I was doing, my little coping mechanisms and my strategies and my vices, I took them all away gradually, trying to get healthier. And what I learned is if you take away all those things, but you don't address why you were doing them in the first place, life gets very hard. Because then you're feeling all the things. You're uncomfortable a lot. You're anxious. You're shifty. You're like you don't understand. I didn't understand why I should feel way better. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. I stopped eating trash food. I stopped staying up late at night. I stopped all these unhealthy behaviors. Why is my mental health so unstable now? And it's because I didn't do anything to address any of the underlying reasons why I was doing those things in the first place. And I think that is something that's missed a lot in the health coaching space and in the functional medicine space. I didn't understand any of those things because I'd never been taught that. And so I knew what to tell people to eat or not eat, or drink or not eat, or what time they should or not drink, or they should go to bed at what time, or like all these practices. Oh, that's unhealthy, don't do that. Oh, that's unhealthy, don't do that. but I didn't. And then people would struggle to do these. I would give them these instructions, and then people would really struggle, and they'd come back and say, "Oh, I didn't do that," or "I ate this thing, I did this thing," and I was like, they came to me because they want to get healthy, but they're not doing the things. So like, what's going on here? And I never understood that. And all of those things that we do them for a reason. Like they're serving a purpose. There's a benefit to it. There's a reason that we do it. And Gabor talks, you mentioned Gabor Mate, he talks about this a lot. And I've since gone through his training, compassionate inquiry, which is a training for therapists. It's pretty intense. And he works a lot with addicts. For those who don't know, he's written books on addiction. He's written books on trauma. He's written books on ADHD and ADD. And he can link a lot of it to unresolved trauma and the way that we find these either behaviors or vices or whatever you want to call it, like foods, whatever the thing is that makes us feel better or helps us avoid feeling a certain thing. We learned these behaviors. We learned these things. Like at one point, that's the thing that helped us regulate our nervous system or calm down or avoid conflict. People who are people pleasers, who always let people like walk all over them or do whatever they want, they had to do that at some point in their childhood, probably, in order to be safe. So we learn all these things to keep us safe, to help us feel better.
Or feel alive, just feeling something.
Or feel alive, yeah, for that other extreme, to feel alive. And a lot of times people that are trying to help, like professionals who are trying to help people to stop doing all these things or change all these behaviors, who don't understand why the people do this in the first place, it can create this dynamic that like you're bad because you do these things, and that causes more shame and more guilt, which then will lead to more of those behaviors. And they'll feel like they're failing, you'll feel like they're failing as the coach, like. And I had to, go into that arena of, why do I do these things? Why do I feel this way? Where's this depression? Where's this anxiety? Like, I didn't even realize that I've had really severe anxiety my whole life. I didn't even know, because I had so many ways to
cope,
to cover it, whether it was food or cannabis or like zoning out and watching movies. I used to own 400 movies. Like, I almost went to film school, because growing up, I would be anxious. I would just throw on a movie. I would watch movies when I was a kid all the time. Like, I was raised by the TV. Like, I watched movies. And so I didn't even realize it. But if you take away the movies, and I took away the food, and I took away all these things, then I'm this anxious ball of stress. And it's like, well, I should feel better. I should feel better when I don't do those things. And so
how did you went from this sensation with all your knowledge? Because as you mentioned, you knew a lot of things about health, but this anxiety, did you find a book? Did you?
I read a ton of books. I tried different protocols. I tried different supplements. I tried to like out functional medicine this. Like, I was like, okay, I'll try this protocol. I'll do this thing. I read books. I tried different practices, but I wouldn't stick to them. I saw probably 5 different therapists or 6 different therapists or counselors trying this thing or that thing. And I almost it was really dangerous. And I don't like to talk about a lot of the details on interviews like this, because I don't know who's listening. It can be really triggering to hear people talk about suicidal things. So, but it was very serious and dangerous. And it was actually, for me, it was an experience with plant medicine that shifted my depression. And I'm not a cheerleader or an advocate. Like, I don't say everyone should, and by plant medicine, I mean psychedelics. And I won't say that everyone should go do that. I think that it had been something in my life for a long time, but I had always stayed away from those things when I was having trouble, when I was in a bad place, because I was scared of how that would go. But I was so desperate, and I had tried everything else, that a friend invited me to a circle, and I went. And by the morning, my depression was pretty much gone. And it wasn't just that my like acute or like that depression that I had right then was gone, but I had this like cloud that followed me around my whole life. Like people with depression can relate to that. Like it's, if something goes good, you can't celebrate it because it could get taken away or it could go wrong. If something could happen, it'll happen. The worst thing will always happen. Like this, you carry this like Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh, or like there's characters in cartoons where the cloud follows them around and rains on them. That was gone. And I cried for like 2 days because I never thought I would get better. Like I never thought I could feel better. And I thought for a while that it was actually the medicine, the substance that did this, but I've since done a lot of work and realized that it wasn't. It's that it opened me up to have an experience there that I wouldn't have been comfortable having otherwise, to receive certain like forgiveness and love and care and like nurturing and like things that usually I wouldn't have allowed myself to receive. So that's where like, I don't mean to really talk about this, but people know now that psychedelic therapy is like a pretty big up and coming thing. And it's not the substance that does the work. It's that MDMA, for example, is about to get approved in the US for FDA for therapy. That's similar to whatever it was that night that I was using. And that opens people up to have experiences and talk about things and explore things in a way that doesn't feel scary and dangerous. It kind of takes the fear away or the discomfort away from being able to explore certain things. So I now know that the healing I received was because I was open to it in a way that I normally wouldn't be. But I just want to clear that up. I don't want to make it sound like psychedelics are these magic things that just fix everything. That's not it. You still have to do the work. And it was the work I did after there.
Yeah.
And after. Yeah. For a year. I went into training for 2 years after that. Like I was so blown away that I could shift so much. I was like, this is incredible. Like I thought I was going to die. Like I had tried so much. I was close to giving up. And then everything went from like black and white to color. And it was like flipping a TV. And I knew then that this whatever you want to call it, the mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, trauma, that whole world of things that tend to get ignored, both by conventional Western medicine, by functional medicine, by most health coaching. Paul's been talking about that stuff for a while, but he's like an outlier. Like he's one of the only ones, and everybody thought he was crazy for a while too. So now that's the buzzword in functional medicine is trauma, and people are actually taking energy healing seriously and these different types of things. So that flipped something in me to where, all right, I need to go down this rabbit hole. Like how did that happen? And what is in there, and why was I suffering so much, and how do I prevent that from happening again, and what's in here that I need to figure out in order to be able to feel good and feel safe and feel alive and stay alive. And so I went through a 2-year training at the Luminous Awareness Institute, which is really heavy. That's I don't even know how to describe it, but it involves energy healing, psychology, neuroscience, trauma, Buddhist and ancient like wisdom tradition, spirituality, very high level meditation techniques that I honestly wasn't even close to ready for. And then I was sitting there like, oh shit, how did I get in this room? So then I had to learn. It was a steep learning curve. And I also, while I was going through that program, I went through Gabor's compassionate inquiry, which is more on the psychology side of things, but that shifted. So I haven't done any training or real study in like functional medicine, nutrition, that type of stuff in probably 4 or 5 years. Like it's been 3 years straight of just mental, emotional, spiritual, trauma, energetic, because for me, that was what I needed to do. Now, if somebody I've had clients though who in the past, I don't work with clients now, but I did with like health stuff. And I worked with people who I looked at their life, I looked at their diet, I looked at their medical stuff, I looked at their labs, and I said, okay, cool. Here's some recommendations. Here's some movement stuff. Here's a dietary recommendation. Here's some supplements. Here's lifestyle stuff. And they were like, okay, I can do this. And then they just did it. And then it was great and they felt great and whatever. Not everyone needs to go where I went.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally
you know,
related.
that doesn't, but for the people who try everything and it doesn't work, or they can't stick to this thing, or they can't stick to that thing, and they carry a lot of shame around that, and they beat themselves up, and they, you know, I couldn't do this diet, or I suck, I can't stick with this thing, or like you really want to feel better, but you're unable to like stick with any of the things that you're trying to do, or you have all these quote bad habits that you can't break or whatever. For those people, or for the people who with chronic disease who do the supplements, they do the protocols, they do the nutrition, and their symptoms don't change, or they get better but never all the way better, or their conditions tend to recycle. Like there's a ton of evidence that, you know, trauma and repressed emotional things and like stress and all these things super linked to autoimmune diseases, super linked to different forms of cancer, super linked to cardiovascular events and heart attacks and things like that. And so if you either can't stick to what you're trying to do ever, and you've tried a million things and you still have this little voice in you that really wants to get better, but you quote fail all the time, or if you do all the things quote right and your health is not going where you want it to, I think both of those people would want to consider, you know, doing some deeper look at like what's going on, what's up with my nervous system, what's up with my mental state, my mind, where am I with spirituality, what is the purpose of my life, like what's my connection to like the natural world, all those kind of like big scary questions. Stick your toe in that water and see what happens.
Yeah, and from this experience you went further than the Rebel Health Tribe, and you created Inora, who is a platform where people can find self-assessment and see where they can go and in which direction they can maybe get involved to find a better homeostasis, a better energy level, right?
Yeah, we created that platform because I looked for it when I was desperate. And it didn't exist. I was trying to find a way, because I was going on the internet and I was searching for like, you know, I'm depressed, help me. Like I was trying to find something, and Google is a mess. Like you'll get a million hits. I tried 4 or 5 different kinds of therapy. It didn't work. And when you try something, when you're feeling like that and you try something that you read on the internet, it says like, oh, this is really good, this helps everyone, this is great for this, and then you go do it and you don't feel any better, then you're the problem to you. In my head, I'm too messed up to fix. Like this doesn't work for me, this doesn't work for me, it works for all these other people. But in reality, I was doing the wrong stuff for me. And so what we're trying to create there is a platform that helps people find the right path for them, whether that's working with somebody individually, or we have like virtual classes, or there's education there. We're going to be building in a lot more stuff. We're kind of in a fundraising round right now. So once we get some more funding, we're going to scale that a lot bigger. But we want a place where people can go and get help finding what it is that they need along these lines. It's all mental, emotional, spiritual, trauma, energetic, like somatic work, nervous system reprogramming stuff. We want to shorten that learning curve for people, because it's an intimidating world. People don't know where to go or what to do or whatever. And for some people, the doorway that's best for them is like a spiritual opening, like they get into meditation and mindfulness and that type of thing. Yeah, other people, they may respond really well to like nervous system practices that help them regulate their nervous system and calm the nervous system. Other people love to explore their own stories and beliefs and mindset things and whatever. And it's all related. There's no way you can separate those things from each other. But some of it, just like history was the subject that was most interesting to me at university, people feel drawn, like even if I say nervous system regulation, and then I say energy healing, and then I say meditation and mindfulness, and then I say mindset and stories, if somebody's listening to that, when they hear those things, they'll internally, if they get really still and quiet and pay attention to how they feel, they'll recoil from one or two of those where they feel like, oh, I don't like, I used to be with energy. If I heard the word energy, I was like out the door. I thought that was the biggest load of crap. And then they might hear another one, like they hear mindset and patterns and stories, and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, part of the work is learning to hear that and then follow what lights you up. Like what do you immediately feel drawn to, and like learning to lean into that. But before you can lean into it, you have to be able to hear it.
Right.
And like that's where practices like meditation come into play, and practices like mindfulness and meditation and qigong. I know Paul Chek teaches a lot of qigong, like things that still not just your mind, but the world around you, where with entrepreneurs, you're talking about, we tend to live in chaos, mental chaos, like actual chaos. If you look at my desk sometimes, like definitely like different levels of chaos. And chaos, you can't hear the quiet in the chaos. Like you can't hear your intuition very well in the chaos. You can't hear little messages from the universe or the God or whatever language people like to use. You can't hear that in the chaos. And I mentioned earlier that I've learned to make changes before things get really bad. And the analogy I use is like you get signals and you get voices and you get little nudges that like, hey, this isn't good. This isn't the right way. Like this isn't, try this or do that. Like we get those all the time. When we don't listen to them and we don't trust that, it gets louder. The messages will get louder and get louder. The same thing happens in the body, symptoms like usually. And I mean, I'm sure you know this too. Like once there's a symptom of like a chronic disease or a disease state, or like, I have chronic headaches, or I have diarrhea every day, or I have pain, or I have this, that is pretty far along in the disease process. Like that is like, even in Western science, Hashimoto's disease for the thyroid, the autoimmune, you don't get a diagnosis of Hashimoto's disease unless like 60% of your thyroid is destroyed. Then you'll get the diagnosis. So the alarms, it's always there. And this is what I've learned in the spiritual practices and in the meditation practices at Luminous and things, is that guidance and those little intuitive hits and like the little signs and signals, they're always there. The quieter you can become, the more that you can hear them, the louder everything is. And I don't mean necessarily volume loud, but life chaos, work chaos, internal mental chaos, like stress, low sleep, just low energy state, like a low vibratory state. And people scoff at energy, but like when you feel like crap, that's a low energy vibratory state. When your hair stands up on your arms, you're so happy and excited, and you walk over a hill and there's this big valley and the sun is setting, and you have these memories in your life where they'll call that the flow state. Like that's a high state. The more we can learn to quiet down and get still, we can hear quieter signals. And so we can make course corrections in our life or in work or in, anything that are before it becomes this very loud signal. Like my wife's autoimmune flare was very, very severe. We had ignored a lot of subtle risk factors and warning signs and all these things. And then her body, Gabor's famous book on chronic disease and trauma is called When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
And it's, if you don't say no to things in your life that you don't want to do, that don't feel good to you, that you're doing for somebody else, that you're putting other people over yourself, that you're doing this thing you don't want to do, if you're always doing all this stuff, eventually your body will say no for you and make you incapable of doing the things. And for me, it was my mind, my mental health, and that said no for me. I didn't get physical disease. I got so depressed and so much in a hole that I couldn't do work. I couldn't do anything, because we hear fight or flight a lot of the stress response. There's also freeze.
The freeze, yeah.
And freeze is a deeper, more ancient physiological response to stress, where you go into a freeze state. And that's where I was. And so I couldn't work very much. I couldn't do very much. I couldn't, like, it was a struggle for me to get through the day. And if anybody's ever been in that state, they know. Like, they know. And so there's ways, though, to work with that, to work from that place. And the work I was trying to do with these therapists was not for people that were in that state. And so I wasn't able to do it. So then I didn't feel good. So that's why we're trying to create the platform that can kind of find people where they are and teach them some of these practices. Like, I've been fortunate enough to be taught by some of the best teachers in the world from some of this stuff, who have spent decades studying in Tibet and Nepal and like places over there for some of these meditation practices and techniques. And then they've come back and taught. And so I kind of feel like I got cheat codes. If anybody out there plays video games, you can get codes that like skip levels or make your guy super strong or whatever. I feel like I've gotten some cheat codes for some of that, like to learn some things that that's all new. I mean, the age of the internet and the way information is now everywhere, there are a lot of practices and traditions and healing things that you would have used to have to go to some country somewhere in the middle of nowhere to study with some guy for 25 years to learn this thing. Now it's disseminating. Like it's
shorter, and we understand a little bit better how it works. It's an amazing time
the
of
science. It's merging. The neuroscience of how a lot of these things work is catching up with the practices themselves. So my friends that are practitioners of these things will always laugh when they see like a news article saying like scientists figure out that meditation does this thing or whatever, because they're like, man, we've been doing that for 3,000 years, but thanks. But for the Western mind, for the people in North America and Europe, for them getting the scientific validation for some of these things, they've even found the meridian lines from Chinese medicine, some meridian point, like the acupuncture points. You can kind of see some scans can show things related to chakra systems. The monks of Tibetan lineage and others have demonstrated like superhuman capabilities on EKGs and other things where they can raise and lower their body temperature. They can raise and lower their heart rate. They can do all kinds of physiological things that you're not supposed to be able to do. There's Wim Hof, the crazy Iceman.
Good example.
Changes his nervous system. They injected him with like endotoxins and he didn't get sick because he was breathing a certain way. Breath is a whole nother.
And it's accessible for everyone. I mean, if you take the example of Wim Hof, in 4 days, you can have the basics. After, of course, you need to work on yourself, as you mentioned earlier. You have this switch. You had this switch with the psychedelic ceremonies, but after you have 2 years of work. And we can find a lot of research and education informations on your website. And I will switch to the other part of this interview, Michael, because you usually ask entrepreneur to share with us their routine, but I will put on the descriptions your superhuman July 30 days in the life of Michael.
That was a lot of Julys ago, so I don't think that would be my current routine.
But you have a routine, and my question was,
today,
how do you know when you need to switch to another level of a routine, or how do you manage? Because again, it's not because you do 30 minutes of meditation every morning that you're going to have a superhuman
Yeah.
day. Because we know, and I like one of your, and you prove it again today in this interview. We are like an onion, and we need to peel one piece after another. And I believe that even if people are stuck somewhere, everything they did was important. But now it's time
Yeah,
to
yeah.
change, and maybe they can find information on your platform. But today for you, how is your routine, and how do you know you need to move to another level, or what are your routine as an entrepreneur? And maybe did you find it easier now that you are in Italy, in a more rural land?
Yeah, I've been in Italy for 5 months, and that has helped in some ways because this culture is not a hustle culture. This is not a workaholic culture. Now, it's having to kind of become one because of the economics of the day. So Italians now have to work a lot more. They don't have the 3-hour lunch breaks that they're famous for. And some of them do, but a lot of people have to work. Like, so their traditional way of being here is threatened by how everything is going globally. But their values are more of free time and family
Dolce
and
Vita.
food and connection and yeah, see, Dolce Vita. But it's I've been really busy with work since I've been here. Plus, I've been in language school, which is really mentally taxing. Like I spoke very little Italian when I got here. And if I was in Rome or Florence or someplace, that would probably be okay. Like, because a lot of people speak English, I can get by on Spanish. But here, there's not very much English spoken. So I had to learn quickly. And between running 2 platforms and doing the language school, I did get pretty burned out. Like I was doing too much. And I had to pull some things back and stop. I had to stop doing some things. So I now know though, like I know when that's happening, like I see it and I'm like, okay. And part of me is like, but you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. And I've gotten to the point where I realize that that voice isn't actually me. Like those thoughts that we have, if you can observe a thought pattern that you have that always comes up like that, like there's a part of me that would panic when I would think like, oh, I have to cut back working on Inora, or I have to go to less language lessons, or I have to cut back working on Rebel Health Tribe, or I have to cut out my meditation in the day because I don't have time, whatever it is. There is a voice that would always be like, no, all of this has to stay. You have to do all of these things. There's no way you can cut out this because then this will happen. I was able to watch that voice. Like I was able to watch that pattern and that panic keep coming up. If something is coming up for you and you can observe it, that means that it's not actually you. Who's observing it? Who's the one observing that pattern? And so that brings me back to like, okay, I'm in charge here. That voice isn't, all those little voices and those patterns, those aren't actually us. So that was happening, and it was a part of me that was really scared that if I let up the gas on any of these things, that I either, well, if I go to less lessons, you're never going to learn Italian, and if I work less on Rebel Health Tribe, that business is going to collapse, or if I work less on Inora, we're never going to get the fundraising and the platform. No, things aren't going to happen quite as fast. And but I'm going to be okay, and it's all going to be fine. And so I scaled things back and I reestablished, boundaries around, I don't work this early in the morning, I don't work this late at night, I take a break in the middle of the afternoon. So like for routine now, I get up much earlier. People here don't get up early. So there's not like a rise and shine early bird culture. Nothing happens here before 9 a.m. So I get up early. Sunrise right now is at 5:30, so I don't get up that early, but I get up pretty early. I actually have a weighted vest. I put that on. I go walk, and this place is all hills. So that's a pretty solid workout. I just do a walk for 30 minutes. It gets the morning sun in your eyes in the morning for people, especially people who have mood issues or depression. Get sun in your eyes in the morning, first thing, 30 minutes. I promise it will change like the rest of your day. It even helps spike your melatonin at the end of the day if you get sun in your eyes in the morning. So I go walk with the vest. People here look at, if I do encounter anyone, which is rare, they stare at me and try to figure out what I'm doing, because it looks kind of like a bulletproof vest, but it's big. Yeah. And so I do that. I come back, I take a quick, pretty cold shower. I don't care how good it is for me. I can't handle like ice baths and things, but I'll do like a little cold shower. I do a little bit of yoga or a little bit of workout. I usually journal and I'll meditate like 15 minutes, and then I wake up my wife, and the rest of our day starts. She goes to school, and like I walk the dog, and then I take short breaks. I have like a 3 or 4 hour work block in the first half of the day and a 3 and 4 hour work block in the second half of the day. But during those blocks, I sometimes set a timer, like the Pomodoro, I think it's called. It's like 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. I'll take breaks. I have a big red light. So I'll go do the red light. I have the gizmo from Heart Math, the little heart rate variability trainer. I'll do that. I'll do another meditation. I'll do some breathing exercises, whatever. Like I just take breaks during those work blocks because I get fried if I work for 4 hours straight in front of the computer. And I take a lunch break of at least 90 minutes. And that usually involves some walking, some outside, some time to slow down. And then in the evening, I usually do another short meditation and get everything ready for the morning, because like I lay out like supplements, water, my vest, my weighted vest, my clothes for the morning, like all that stuff. Because I've noticed if I don't prepare like that for the morning in the nighttime, I just don't do it. So I like set myself up for success the next morning by laying everything out and making it really easy. So I don't have to do anything. I just walk downstairs and it's all there, and then it starts over. And I used to always listen to audiobooks when I would walk and or drive or cook or clean or anything, because I always was trying to like be productive in every second that I'm awake. And what I've learned is one morning I couldn't find my earbuds for my phone. So when I walked with the vest, I didn't have that. And I realized I needed that. So it's beautiful here. It's like morning, there's like birds chirping. I'm walking up and down. I can see like rolling hills for miles, and it's like postcard Tuscany. So I just walk 30 minutes with that vest and just be present with where I am, like, and listen to the birds and look at the trees and see the beautifulness. And it's okay to not always be being productive.
Yeah. For me, that's the signal that I have to slow down. That's when I do audio and I feel like the audio is getting too much. It's where I know that I've been working too much. So for you, the level of too much work, it's this little voice pushing you even further, that you say, okay, now it's time to step back. And
yeah, I can just feel, I notice I'll be more agitated. I notice physically, I know where my anxiety lives in my legs. A lot of the time, my legs will feel like anxious. I'll tap my feet. I'll notice that my communication with my wife will change. I'll notice that I begin to develop a lot of resistance to doing the work that I'm doing, which is another part because there's the part that's like the one with the whip saying go faster, go harder, do more things. I also have a part that like hates working.
Yeah.
And so it just wants to be playing all the time. So then that will start doing this like with each other. And then I'll notice I'm like procrastinating or I have resistance. And so that's when I have to like, look, all right, stop, what's going on? Like those stuck points, instead of trying to find ways to push through them, which is what I always used to do, like, I'm going to do this, I don't care, like finding ways to push through them, get curious about why that's happening in the first place. Like ask yourself some questions and see what the answers are. Like, why am I avoiding doing this thing? Or why don't I want to do that? Or why did I just act like that? Or why are my legs anxious? Or why, what is going on? And it goes back to getting quiet and getting back into that space and like exploring what comes up when you ask those questions of like, what, like, Gabor's training is called compassionate inquiry. So it's asking questions, inquiry, but doing it in a compassionate way with no judgment. And you can do that for yourself. Like, it's not what's wrong with you, you don't want to do this thing. It's what is going on? Like, why don't you want to do this? What doesn't feel good right now? What is going on? Like, and oftentimes for me, when I'm procrastinating with something, it's because I'm scared.
Yes.
I'm scared to fail at that thing.
Would it be like asking the question to a good friend? You see a good friend having a hard time and you talk to him, like, you will never be hard with your good friend. I mean,
no, or your partner or a child. Like often, like I had to do a lot of sessions of practice when I was going through these trainings. So I don't work with clients now, but I did a lot of client work when I was in the trainings. And I would use the analogy of like, if they had a child, I would use the analogy of their child. And if they didn't have any children, I would have them envision themselves at a certain age where they felt really vulnerable or tender, maybe 4, 5. And then how would you speak to yourself who's that young? But good friend works too. And I've seen those memes go around like, would you ever talk to this person like this? Why do you say these things to yourselves? And like, we did that because we learned that. Like we do that because we learned that. And for a lot of people, that harsh critic of oneself, it served a purpose at one point. Like, and it cares too. Like, I talk about parts a little bit. There's a therapy modality called internal family systems, or IFS, that is involves parts work. We learned it kind of at Luminous and a little bit at Compassionate Inquiry, and I've done a training under Dick Schwartz, who's the founder of internal family systems, but it has to do with parts and how we all have these parts and working with the parts instead of against them. And his like one tagline that he always says is there are no bad parts. So and he's worked with serial killers. He's worked with people in like max prisons that have done the most horrible crimes. And he does work with them, and they get to like, the reason that somebody did these crimes was because a sense of power and control made them feel safe, because when they were a child, they were beaten and abused and assaulted, and they never had any control. So they had a part that learned that like they need control in order to feel safe. So then they always had parts that were remorseful, that were sad, that were so ashamed and embarrassed of the things that they did, all these things. And even the one that was making them do what they did, it was doing it in a distorted way to keep them safe, to give them safety that they didn't have, or to give them control that they never had. Almost all of those people were raised in very abusive, terrible conditions. And like, so think of that, because we all have these parts we demonize, like the part that wants to eat a pint of ice cream, or the part that doesn't want to do the work, or the part that doesn't like to work out. I know you have listeners who are probably like work out all the time, and there's some of them that secretly hate doing it, and they like push themselves to do it. That part of you that hates to work out, there's a reason. And you can get curious with that. And if you do it from a place of judgment, just like if you're talking to someone else, like say you were doing something and I was like, why do you do that? That's so stupid. Or I said, I notice you do this thing and it's kind of out of alignment with, you know, what your goals are and what you're wanting to do. What do you think you get out of that? What benefit do you think comes from that? Like what do you feel when you do that? What does it feel good? Like that's a way different way to ask the question. And one way causes somebody or your part of you to get defensive and then close off and then they won't answer the questions. And the other way, it's non-threatening when there's no judgment. I saw a meme yesterday that said shame dies when stories are told in safe places. And I think that's really true. So like it's create safety around it. Like don't make judgment, don't have expectations, don't create a right and wrong, just get really curious. And I know the question was about routines and now we're talking about how to like work with our own psyche around like parts and things, but it's this work is really important. And for entrepreneurs, you're already being torn in so many directions with your work. And like this demand and this demand and this thing, and you're learning marketing, but like, because now to be an entrepreneur, you have to learn digital marketing and this kind of marketing and this stuff and copywriting and offers and lead magnet, all these terms and all this stuff that's really overwhelming. Plus you're supposed to be really good at the thing that you do also, and learning how to do that. Plus you have people in your life who are probably wanting more of you to be present to do that. So you're already being pulled and torn and there's already a million things you're juggling. That's also happening inside. So if you can learn to handle at least the inside part in like a safe way, like you don't need to cause fighting there. Like there doesn't need to be drama.
No. So your advice for entrepreneur today after these 2 last year will be to find somewhere a safe place and just stop and see what's happening?
Yeah, just slow down. Like I think that would be, and in a lot of ways, because entrepreneurs always think they have to have the foot on the gas at all times as fast as they can go. And I found that when I slow down and when I give myself space to figure out like, why do I have resistance to this? Or why does this feel overwhelming? Or what, like, instead of pushing through those things and I'll just work 10 hours a day instead of 8, or I'll just work 12 hours a day, or I'll just do this harder, I'll do more. If I actually slow down when I'm having resistance and having trouble, or I take time, because when we most need a thing like a routine, like me going walking and doing meditation and drinking tea in the morning in the winter, I have tea in the morning, and like reading or journaling, whatever. When we most feel like we don't have time to do those things because there's like a million other things to do, that's the time that you most need to do those things. And that's the test, because that's when it's hardest to do it. Because those things feel non-essential. You're not being productive when you do those things. But what I've learned is that I'm far more productive in general
after these
when I do those things, because my mind is more clear, I'm more efficient, I'm more effective, my time spent is more in alignment, like everything flows more smoothly, and I'll get more done at a higher quality in less time than when I just force myself through and stop those practices. And then I'm not listening to those signals. I'm not hearing those signals. And then they'll get louder, and then I'll crash, and then I'll get sick, and then I'll feel terrible. And then all these things will happen. So it's check in with yourself. Like in the morning, that meditation time and that walk for me is really just time to like check in with myself and pay attention. Like what patterns keep coming up? What thoughts are intruding into my mind? What am I worried about? What am I scared of? What's going on? What can I observe is happening? And stepping back and just observing it without like making it wrong or making it bad. And then just getting curious about it. Like, okay, you're really procrastinating on writing this email sequence. Why is that? Well, one, I'm not confident in my writing. Two, maybe it won't work. Maybe I'm going to do this thing and it'll fail.
Or maybe it will work, but I will not be able to handle it.
Maybe that. And that's usually, people usually aren't aware of that one. That's usually, oh no, I'm not scared of success, or I'm not scared. That's like the one that a lot of people say doesn't exist, but I've dealt with that. Like I have to do work right now around feeling like it's okay that I can be doing what I'm doing here, that it's okay that I'm capable of and deserve, like moving from where I live to here in Italy. I brought my wife. She's not working right now. I'm taking care of her, and she's getting time off from work for her health, for autoimmunity. And like that threatens a lot of stories and beliefs that I have about myself around my own like self-worth and all these things. And so it is, when we do challenge these stories about ourselves, like the success is a challenge to a story of like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't deserve, is a really big one. And people are usually not aware of it, but a lot of us have I don't deserve programming, so that when good things do happen, we'll find a way to get out of it, like, or we'll find a way to avoid it or screw it up or sabotage it. And it's just not, yeah. And so then exploring those things, like now when I'm scared or anxious or have resistance to things, during that walk in the morning is where I really take inventory, and I say, okay, what am I actually scared of? I'm not scared of writing a bunch of emails. I've written like so many emails I can't even count. It's not the writing of the emails. What's the outcome that I'm scared of? And why am I scared of that outcome? And is that true? Is it a real thing? Like, does it matter? Like, we tend to like turn these small things that don't really matter into these giant things and then hide from them.
And maybe what do you need at that time to go forward? Yeah, because as you mentioned, once you have the tools, or once you have the shift, the work still has to be done. So after, when you have this answer, but then you have options to take actions.
Yeah, and just the ability to do what I'm making this process seem very easy, of like quieting down and hearing these things and working through them and whatever. It's not that smooth. It's not that easy. And I've done a lot of practice with it. Like, these trainings were focused primarily on having the skills to be able to do those things, to feel subtle shifts in my energy, to know when certain things have changed, to get myself into a state of mind that's a state of consciousness that's like allows me to see those things. And then I studied a lot of psychology to understand those loops and patterns. So like, I get that I'm making it sound a lot easier than it probably is for a lot of people, but just start with, take 5 minutes a few times a day, sit down and just focus your awareness on your breath and nothing else. And when you get distracted and your mind starts racing, be like, oh, my mind was just doing that thing it does. And then go back and then focus on your next breath. And the breath is always used as a tool for that, to train people, to teach people, because it's easy to like, that's easy to go back to the breath. Eventually, when you practice these things enough, you don't need to do that. And you can just stay in that state of awareness. But like, that's why breath is always used in mindfulness training, because it's something that's constant, that we can always bring our attention back. And it brings us to now. Most of those things that we're worried about, they're not now. Like, they're maybe then, but probably not even then, or they happened in the past or whatever. But the breath is only now, and it always brings you back to the now. And so just start there and always come back to the breath. And eventually you'll notice patterns in what the things are that disrupt that. So if it's the same thought pattern that keeps coming up over and over, and you're like, oh, my brain did that thing, I'm going to go back to the breath. Notice that that thing is the same thing a lot. And then get curious about that thing.
Yeah. Like, as you mentioned, just start, because to get out of this fight and fight or the freeze mode, you need to have options, a way out. And starting by 5 minutes now and concentrate on your breathing, it's a good start. And then after, you will probably need some guidance, some coaching, some help, and then you can go and progress.
I hope that all makes sense. I don't know if all that made sense, but that's kind of my non-routine routine.
Yeah, but that's very inspiring. I mean, I know you for like 2015 when you launched the Primal 90 for the first time, and you were a Czech practitioner. That's why I started to follow your work, and I saw your emails changing and your progressions and your program and your project going forward. So thank you very much for taking the time to share all these informations and expertise and routine with us, Michael. I very appreciate it. So if people wants to follow your work, you have the rebelhealthtry.com. You have also the podcast, The Natural Evolution. The longevity film.com is still available. And in Inora, just had a switch in my Inora.com. That is the latest platform for people who wants to find out a little bit about what we just talked. So thank you very much, Michael, and wishing you a very nice end of the day, Dolce Vita for tonight.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy what you're doing as well. And you made it really easy to talk about some of these things because you did so much homework on me and my story, and that's a skill like that's not a lot of interviewers take the time to know anything about the person that they're interviewing. So I appreciate that, and thank you for what you're doing. And entrepreneurs need the work that you do and that so many others do in this industry. Like as much as, I mean, we think like, oh, the chronically sick people or the overweight people or no, just speaking from experience as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs need this stuff, not just the internal stuff, but the diet and the lifestyle and the, everything that, all of it, because it is increasingly difficult and challenging and stressful to be an entrepreneur, and go easy on yourselves. So yeah, thank you. It's super fun. I had a good time.
Oh, I really enjoy. I'm honored to have you in this podcast, and thank you very much for the testimonial. I really appreciate it. So thank you all for listening our interview. I will wish you a very interesting and end of day, and till next time, take care, and take you soon. Talk too soon. Bref, I'm tired. Thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.